Money Confessions.
Story 1. I turned $8,000 into $28,000 in crypto, then lost it all overnight. I still wake up some mornings expecting to see those numbers in my wallet again. $28,426. It's burned into my brain like a tattoo I never asked for. And the way it vanished? I can't forget that either. This is how I lost everything I thought I had earned, in less than one day. Let me start from the beginning. I wasn't always into crypto. In fact, before 2020, I barely understood investing. I had a Roth IRA with a few $1,000s in a target date fund, and thought that made me financially savvy. Then COVID hit, and the market crashed, and Reddit blew up with stories of people turning $600 stimulus checks into $6,000 in weeks. I got curious. Then, I got greedy. At first, I just wanted to understand how it worked. I read forums, watched videos, and downloaded Coinbase. I put in $500, then another $500. I bought Bitcoin and Ethereum, and watched them swing up and down like a roller coaster. I got hooked not because I was making money, but because I could. That possibility was like a drug. It made every other financial decision in my life seem boring and slow. By 2022, I had put $8,000 into various coins. ETH, SOL, some altcoins I didn't really understand. But I'd been lucky. That $8,000 had grown to over $20,000 during the 2021 bull run. And while most people cashed out when the market got shaky, I kept doubling down. I told myself I believed in the technology. In truth, I believed in the numbers going up. And it wasn't just the money. It was the feeling that I had discovered something before the rest of the world, that I was ahead of the curve. I started checking prices in the middle of the night. I set up alerts for every 2% swing. I joined Discord groups where people talked about life-changing gains, like it was a normal thing. I wanted that. I wanted to make enough that I wouldn't need a boss anymore, that I could buy time back. Then I found leverage trading. It started with an ad for a crypto exchange offering 20x leverage. I watched a YouTube trader explain how he turned $1,000 into $10,000 in one trade by riding momentum. It sounded too good to be true. But by then, I was already watching my portfolio hover between $25k and $30k, and I felt invincible. What's one more layer of risk when you've already beat the odds? I signed up. I moved $5,000 to the new exchange. I placed my first leveraged long on Ethereum. It was a small position, just to test the waters. It worked. I made $400 in 15 minutes. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. The next day, I went all in. I took my best performing coins and converted them to ETH so I could use them as collateral. I opened a $25,000 long position on ETH at 20x leverage. I figured the price only had to move a little for me to make a few $1,000s. Here's the thing about leverage. When you magnify your gains, you also magnify your losses. I understood that in theory. I didn't understand what it felt like to watch your position get liquidated. It happened at 3:12 a.m. I still remember the notification. Position liquidated? ETHUSD, $25,000. I stared at it in disbelief. I refreshed the app. It was real. My entire leveraged position had been wiped out because the price of ETH dropped by 4% in the middle of the night. My collateral was gone. My wallet now showed $147.32. I thought there had been a mistake. Surely there had to be a glitch. I opened a support ticket. I took screenshots. I scoured the chart, but everything checked out. The market had dipped just enough to wipe me out completely. And then, of course, it bounced right back up. I couldn't breathe. I'd gone from nearly $30,000 to less than $200 in a few hours. And all of it was my fault. I didn't tell anyone for weeks. I went to work like nothing had happened. I ate dinner with my girlfriend like I wasn't mentally screaming. I'd never lost that much money before. I'd never had that much money before. It wasn't just numbers. It was the future I thought I was building. The worst part wasn't the loss. It was how easy it had been. One click, one bad decision. That's all it took. And the feeling that came afterward wasn't just regret. It was shame. I wasn't some victim of a scam. I did this to myself. Eventually, I came clean to a friend who'd also been trading. He told me he'd done the same thing, lost $12K in a similar way. We laughed about it, sort of. Misery loves company. But the truth is, I still think about that money every day. In the weeks that followed, I tried to pick up the pieces. I reinstalled my budgeting app. I took a break from social media. I even deleted the crypto exchanges from my phone. But the psychological damage was already done. Every time I looked at a chart, I saw ghosts of money that used to be mine. I replayed the moment I clicked the trade over and over. I kept asking myself, why didn't I wait? Why didn't I set a stop loss? Why did I feel the need to go that big? The truth? I wanted to win. I wanted to prove I could beat the system, that I was smarter than the average investor. But I wasn't. I was just early enough to ride the wave and foolish enough to believe I controlled it. There was a moment about a week later where I sat in my car during lunch and just cried. I'm not even sure what triggered it. Maybe it was the realization that I had nothing to show for 2 years of obsession. Maybe it was the shame of having to start over again, knowing how close I'd been to something better. If I'd held on to it, maybe I could have used it for a down payment, paid off my car, taken a real vacation. I had dreams of helping my parents who were nearing retirement with barely enough in their 401k. I wanted to be the one who made it out, who made things easier for all of us. Instead, it went to a few lines of code and a price chart that didn't care about me. I'm not touching crypto again. At least not for a long time. I've gone back to basics. Index funds, saving regularly, no more shortcuts. Because I learned the hard way that fast money usually goes just as fast. I keep a screenshot of my portfolio at its peak. Not to punish myself, but to remember. To remind myself that what feels like success can just as easily become a trap. And that there are no guarantees. Not in markets, not in life, and certainly not in leverage. So yeah, that's how I lost $28,000. One trade, one night, one very expensive lesson. Story 2. I spent $12,000 on a business that died before it launched. I used to think that being your own boss was the ultimate freedom. No clocking in, no one breathing down your neck. Just you and your vision. I still want to believe that. But after losing $12,000 on a business that never even got off the ground, it's a lot harder to hold on to that dream. This started about a year and a half ago. I was working full-time in digital marketing, mostly for small e-commerce brands. I wasn't rich, but I had savings, a decent credit score, and a belief that I could do better than the clients I was building campaigns for. I saw their numbers. I knew how much they made selling simple things like custom mugs, pet bandanas, or kitchen gadgets. One guy was making $40,000 a month with bamboo toothbrushes. So I started making plans. I gave myself 6 months to come up with a product, build a brand, and launch. I wanted to do it lean and smart. I didn't want a warehouse or a physical storefront. Just a solid Shopify store, drop shipping or fulfillment via a 3PL, and aggressive paid ads. It wasn't supposed to be complicated. I settled on a niche I felt good about, eco-friendly home goods. I found a manufacturer in the US who could do private label, biodegradable cleaning products. It felt right, ethical, scalable, good margins. I even came up with a brand name, bought the domain, hired a designer for a logo and packaging. Every step felt like progress. The first real expense was inventory. To get my minimum order, I had to spend $4,200. Then another $1,300 on shipping and customs. I didn't love draining that much from my savings, but it still felt manageable. Then came the website build, $800, the product photography, $600, branding consultants, $450, and my first ad campaign, $2,000. Before I knew it, I'd spent close to $9,500. I told myself it was fine. These were sunk costs. I had a product. I had a brand. All I needed was traction. The launch came and went. I made 5 sales in the first week, 3 of which were from friends. I figured maybe I just needed to tweak the ads. I A/B tested headlines. I tried different demo videos. I switched platforms from Facebook to TikTok. More spend, more tweaks, more stress. By week 4, I had spent another $2,500 in ads and only brought in $482 in revenue. My ROAS was abysmal. I tried reaching out to influencers. I sent out samples. No bites. The traffic was cold and the bounce rate was sky high. People were landing, looking, and leaving. I was out of money. I tried running one last sale, offering 40% off. Still barely a blip. The warehouse charged me $170/month for storage and fulfillment. And that was adding up too. It hit me one night while I was reconciling expenses in a spreadsheet. I had spent $12,137.29. I had made just under $700 back. There was no turning this around. I shut the site down the next morning. I emailed the warehouse to liquidate what they could and donate the rest. I kept the domain name, but everything else, the packaging, the samples, the business email, I let go. I didn't talk about it for a long time. I felt like a failure. Everyone talks about startups and passive income and just launch culture like it's easy. But the truth is, I did everything right on paper. I researched, planned, spent carefully, and executed. And still, I failed. In hindsight, I think I fell in love with the idea more than the market. I was so focused on building a brand I was proud of. I didn't think enough about whether anyone else actually wanted the product. I assumed because I cared about sustainability, my customers would too. But convenience still rules the day, and I underestimated how hard it is to compete for attention when you're just a random brand on Instagram. What hurts most isn't the money, though that stings. It's the confidence hit. I still have moments where I hesitate before starting anything new, like I'm afraid to try again. But I'm trying to see it differently now. The $12,000 was tuition. I paid to learn what not to do. I paid to learn what real risk feels like. I'm back at my marketing job now, saving again, thinking carefully. If I ever try again, I'll do it with real validation, not just excitement. I still believe in being your own boss. But now, I know the price of that belief. So yeah, that's how I lost $12,000, before I even made it out of the gate. Story 3. I bought a $9,000 car in a panic, and it died in 4 days. When you're desperate, logic leaves the room. That's what I have come to believe. And nothing says desperation like buying a car in cash off Facebook Marketplace from a guy who told me she just needs a little TLC. This happened last summer. I live in a mid-sized city, and my car had been on its last legs for a while. A 2008 Honda Accord with 190,000 miles, transmission slipping, AC dead, check engine light laughing at me daily. I knew I was pushing it, but I kept delaying because I didn't want to dip into my emergency fund. Then, one morning, it didn't start. Completely dead. Towed it to the shop, and they quoted me $3,800 for a full transmission rebuild. My heart sank. That was nearly all my savings, and I needed a car for work. Public transit here is a joke, and Ubers would have cost me more than a lease. I panicked. I went online, typed used cars near me, and found a 2012 BMW 328i for $9,000. The ad said it had 102,000 miles, clean title, drives great. I messaged the seller, met him that same evening. The car looked good. Clean interior, smooth drive around the block. He talked fast. Said he was moving out of state and needed it gone quickly. Offered to knock off $500 if I paid cash that night. I said yes. No pre-purchase inspection, no VIN report, no due diligence. Just a wad of cash, a handshake, and a scribbled bill of sale. I drove home feeling like I'd beat the system. A luxury car. For under 10 grand. I was winning. The warning signs came the next morning. A low oil pressure light. Then a strange rattle under the hood. By day 3, it was misfiring so hard I couldn't get above 30 miles per hour. I took it to a mechanic. They called me 2 hours later and said, "Do you want the good news or the bad news?" The good news was the tyres were fine. The bad news? Cracked engine block, suspension damage, oil leaks, repair estimate $6,400. And even then, no guarantee the engine wouldn't seize. I called the seller. Disconnected. I tried the email. Bounced. I checked his Facebook profile. Deleted. I was stuck with a dead car and no money. I couldn't afford the repairs. I couldn't afford another car. I cried in my kitchen, sitting on the floor, trying to make a spreadsheet of what I could sell to make rent. Eventually, I sold the car for $1,100 to a junkyard. They towed it for free. I still owed my bank $2,000 from the cash I'd pulled off my credit card to make up the difference. I took the bus for 6 weeks. It made me late to work 3 times, and I almost lost my job. Eventually, I scraped together enough for a down payment on a leased Toyota Corolla. It's not glamorous, but it runs. Looking back, I'm horrified by how fast I made that decision. I didn't just lose $9,000. I lost my sense of safety, of control, all because I couldn't sit in the discomfort of not having a solution for 48 more hours. I kept thinking, what if I had waited? What if I had just borrowed a car from a friend or taken a rental for a few days? What if I had done the things I now know how to do? Run a VIN check, schedule a $100 inspection, ask for maintenance records. But the truth is, I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to feel helpless. I wanted the problem solved now, and that impatience cost me everything. I remember lying awake at night, not just feeling dumb, but ashamed. I didn't want to tell anyone what happened. Not my coworkers, not even my family. I kept saying I was between cars, as if that made it sound intentional. I even avoided group chats where people might ask about my new car. Eventually, I opened up to a friend. He told me he'd done something similar in college, bought a used Jeep that broke down the next week. We talked about how car culture in the US basically forces people into risky decisions unless they have cash and time. Most of us don't. There's this illusion that if something looks good and you trust your gut, it'll work out. But my gut was anxious and desperate, not wise. And the seller? He knew exactly what kind of buyer I was. Rushed, vulnerable, unprepared. What hurt the most was how little recourse I had. No warranty, no paperwork to contest, no real identity to trace. I reported the incident to Facebook and filed a police report, but nothing came of it. In their eyes, it was a private party transaction. Buyer beware. Over time, I stopped obsessing over the loss. I took a budgeting course, started an emergency fund again, and swore never to buy anything under pressure. The next time I buy a car, it'll be slow, boring, and properly vetted. I still think about that $9,000. About the few hours I actually enjoyed the car, windows down, music up, thinking I'd pulled off a deal. I replay that moment like a mirage, something that never really belonged to me. So that's how I lost $9,000 in 4 days. Not to theft or fraud, but to fear. And I paid for it, one bus ride at a time. Story 4, I thought I was saving enough for taxes, then I owed $7,000. Freelancing always sounded like the dream. Work from anywhere, set your own hours, pick your clients. But nobody tells you about the part where April shows up, and you owe thousands of dollars to the IRS you never planned for. This happened 2 years ago. I had recently left my job at a marketing agency to go freelance full-time. The decision wasn't impulsive. I'd built up a few steady clients on the side, run the numbers, even mapped out a budget. The goal was freedom. No more morning meetings or office politics, just projects I cared about and time to breathe. The first few months went surprisingly well. I landed a few retainer contracts, pulled in more than I was making at my old job, and enjoyed the novelty of working in pajamas. I remember telling a friend, I should have done this years ago. I knew taxes would be different. No one was withholding anything from my checks anymore. But I thought I was being responsible. I put aside about 15% of every invoice into a separate savings account labeled taxes, do not touch. It felt grown up, adult, smart. But smart, it turns out, isn't the same as accurate. When tax season came, I scheduled a call with a CPA instead of using TurboTax. I thought I was being proactive. I sent him everything, 1,099 S, receipts, mileage logs, the whole spreadsheet. When we got on the phone, he sounded serious. You owe $6,847, and that's after deductions. I laughed. I thought it was a mistake. I told him I had a tax fund. Then I opened the account and saw the balance, $2,960. It wasn't even halfway there. I must have gone quiet for a full minute. The CPA started walking me through the numbers. Self-employment tax, higher income bracket, lack of quarterly payments. Every line he read felt like a punch. My stomach dropped. I didn't have a backup plan. I had maybe $1,000 in checking, rent due in 2 weeks, and suddenly this looming bill I had no way of paying. I asked if I could set up a payment plan. He said yes, but interest would accrue. He recommended increasing my quarterly payments immediately. I spent the next 2 days in a fog. I cancelled a weekend trip. I stopped ordering food. I applied for a personal loan, got denied, and finally borrowed $2,000 from my parents to buy myself time. For months, I made payments to the IRS. $250 here, $300 there, whatever I could spare. Every time a client paid late, my anxiety spiked. I stopped sleeping well. I kept spreadsheets tracking interest accrual. It felt like a cloud I couldn't escape. I also started doubting myself. Was I cut out for this? I thought I was doing everything right. Tracking expenses, paying estimated taxes, living below my means. But one miscalculation spiraled into months of stress. It took over a year to pay off. I ended up paying more than $7,200 total once the interest and penalties were factored in. But the financial damage wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the way it shook my confidence. I second-guessed every decision after that. I passed on new clients because I feared more complexity. I obsessed over every invoice. I even considered going back to full-time work just to have someone else take care of taxes for me. Now I pay a CPA every quarter. I set aside 30%, not 15%. I log everything the day it happens. It's borderline compulsive, but I can't afford another surprise like that. I tell this story because I think a lot of freelancers think they're doing enough, when really they're just a few percentage points away from disaster. I wasn't irresponsible, I just underestimated the system. So yeah, that's how I lost over $7,000 in 1 year. Not in a flash, not in a scam, but in slow, suffocating miscalculation. And it taught me that freedom isn't free, especially when the IRS is involved. Story 5. I spent $5,000 on a vacation that didn't exist. You don't realize how fast trust can cost you everything until it happens. For me, it happened with a dream vacation. One I paid for, planned around, and imagined down to the last detail, only to realize it never existed. This was supposed to be the year. After years of student loan payments, tight budgets, and skipping birthdays for double shifts, I finally felt like I could breathe. I had saved up a little over $6,000 just for myself, not for bills or emergencies, just a reward. I decided to book a luxury vacation, 10 days in Bali. I wanted the full experience. Private villa, excursions, massages, the works. I started researching packages, mostly on Instagram and Pinterest. That was probably my first mistake. Everything looked beautiful, too perfect maybe, but I was in the mindset to make it happen. Then I found this boutique travel company that seemed to specialize in luxury trips for solo travelers. Their photos were incredible. Their reviews looked legit. I exchanged messages with someone named Tasha, who answered every question within minutes and even helped customize the itinerary for me. I was sold. She sent me an invoice, $4,847 for the full package. That included airport pickup, a private driver, all accommodations, and several guided activities. I hesitated a little at the upfront payment, but she said it would lock in the price and reserve the villa. She even threw in a free beach photography session to sweeten the deal. I paid via bank transfer. That was my second mistake. Immediately after, things shifted. Communication slowed down. Tasha took longer to reply. She said they were handling logistics. I tried to stay calm. I told myself this was normal. 2 weeks before my departure, I reached out to confirm details. Nothing. I emailed, messaged, even tried calling a number she had given me once. Disconnected. I started panicking. I looked up the business again and realized all their recent Instagram comments were from angry customers. People saying they'd been scammed, that Tasha wasn't real, that the pictures were stolen from Airbnb and travel bloggers. My stomach dropped. I contacted my bank, but they said since it was a voluntary wire transfer, there wasn't much they could do. I filed a report with the FTC. I contacted the Better Business Bureau. I even submitted an internet fraud report to the FBI. Nothing came of it. I had lost $4,847. Just like that. I spent the week I was supposed to be in Bali in my apartment, sick with shame and disappointment. I couldn't bring myself to tell my friends. When people asked how the trip went, I lied. I said it was amazing. I even posted a stock photo of a beach with a caption about recharging. I hated myself for it. But I couldn't face the truth yet. Not out loud. It took months to come to terms with what happened. I kept replaying every decision. Why didn't I check the domain registration? Why didn't I Google reverse image search those photos? Why didn't I use a credit card? Because I wanted it to be real. That's the answer. I had saved for so long, waited for something good, and I just wanted it to be true. Eventually, I told a friend what happened. She didn't judge me. She told me her cousin had almost been scammed in a similar way with a fake yoga retreat. That made me feel a little less alone. Since then, I've gotten savvier. I research everything, I pay with credit, I use travel agents or major booking platforms, and I talk about scams more openly because I know how easy it is to fall for one when you're chasing something that finally feels within reach. I also started budgeting differently. I rebuilt my savings slowly with a rule that any large expense had to survive a 72-hour review. I now ask myself a series of questions before I spend anything over $500. Is it from a verified source? Can I walk away and still feel okay? Have I looked up independent reviews? It's not a foolproof system, but it helps me pause. The emotional fallout from the scam lingered longer than the financial one. For a while, I felt like I couldn't trust my instincts. Every time I saw a good deal online, I froze. Was this real? Was I about to get fooled again? I used to be someone who loved planning trips and daydreaming about destinations. That joy was gone for a while. What really helped was talking to others. I started reading scam survivor forums, sharing my experience anonymously, even commenting on Reddit threads where people asked for help vetting travel companies. It felt like a small way to reclaim some power. If I could keep one person from falling for the same trick, maybe the whole thing wouldn't feel like such a total loss. Eventually, I booked another trip, this time through a verified platform with clear cancellation policies and secure payment. It wasn't Bali. It was a 4-day staycation in a cabin 2 hours from home. But it was real. It was peaceful. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night. I still think about that fake trip sometimes. Not just the money I lost, but the version of myself I was trying to become by taking it. The version that had made it. That deserved to be pampered. I think I'd wrapped so much hope into that one trip that losing it felt like losing a piece of my future. But I'm working on that. Rebuilding isn't fast, but it's possible. And now I know that security isn't about how perfect something looks. It's about how well it holds up when you look closer. So yeah, that's how I lost $5,000. To a dream that turned out to be a lie. And a lesson I paid for with money I'll never see again. But maybe with wisdom I won't forget. Story 6. I made $1,800 on Monday, then lost $6,000 by Friday. It started with a green candle, one of those long, beautiful bars shooting up on a stock chart like a rocket, and me thinking, this is it. This is how it starts. That Monday, I made $1,800 in less than 2 hours a day, trading a small cap tech stock I'd been watching for weeks. The move wasn't even that complicated. Buy the breakout, sell into the spike, clean, textbook. It felt easy. Too easy. That was my first real win. I'd been dabbling in trading for about 6 months, mostly watching YouTube videos, reading Reddit threads, and paper trading on simulators. But this time, it was real money. And it worked. I started with a $3,000 account. That one trade bumped me to almost $5,000. I felt like a genius. I took screenshots, texted a friend, joked about quitting my job. By Tuesday morning, I was looking for the next setup. I found a biotech stock with upcoming FDA news and high short interest. The chatter online was intense. People were calling it the next GameStop. I jumped in with $2,000. The stock dipped. I averaged down. It dipped more. By market close, I was down $900. I told myself it would bounce. It didn't. Wednesday was worse. I tried a different play, momentum trading a pump and dump that everyone on Twitter was watching. I caught the top by accident, sold at a loss. I could feel the wind slipping through my fingers. But instead of stopping, I doubled down. I transferred another $1,500 into my brokerage account and started trading with size. No stops, just conviction. By Thursday, I was waking up at 5 a.m. to watch pre-market charts, chasing stocks I didn't understand, hoping for a miracle reversal. It didn't come. I lost another $2,200 in a single trade when a stock got halted and reopened 30% lower. Friday was the breaking point. I went in heavy on a penny stock that looked like it was about to squeeze. It didn't. It collapsed. My position went from green to red in under 5 minutes, and I froze. I didn't cut it. I hoped. I watched it bleed down to nothing. My $6,000 loss wasn't just money. It was a momentum, confidence, the dream that maybe, just maybe, I was onto something that could change my life. I logged out of my brokerage app and didn't open it for 3 weeks. I couldn't. Every time I thought about that week, my stomach turned. I kept replaying the trades in my head, thinking about how close I'd been to walking away at $1,800. If I'd stopped Monday, I would have felt like a winner. But I didn't stop. Because I didn't know how. Nobody tells you how hard it is to walk away when you're up. Everyone talks about cutting losers, but few talk about the greed that comes when you taste a win. I wasn't prepared for it. That win lit a fire in me, but it also blinded me. I didn't tell anyone at first. I felt too ashamed. Who loses that much money in a week? Who thinks they can day trade with no real experience and walk away clean? Me, apparently. Eventually, I told my roommate. He listened without judgment. He'd lost $3,000 once on crypto and said the same thing. The worst part isn't the money. It's what it does to your sense of self. You go from thinking you're smart to feeling like a fool. That weekend, I journaled everything. Every trade, every thought, every justification I used to break my own rules. It was brutal, but it helped. I started noticing patterns, not in the charts, but in myself. I was chasing high volume plays, not because they were good setups, but because they were trending. I was entering trades without a stop loss, even though every resource says that's rule number one. I was checking Twitter during trades, taking advice from people with usernames like OptionsGuru69. The more I wrote, the more I realized I wasn't really trading. I was gambling. I took a break from trading, cancelled my Discord subscriptions, unsubscribed from every trading influencer. I went back to learning, but this time slower. I opened a new brokerage account and capped myself at $100 trades. I promised I wouldn't scale up until I had 3 green months in a row. I also started therapy. That might sound dramatic, but I needed it. The experience had triggered something deeper. Feelings of worthlessness, perfectionism, the need to prove I could make it on my own. I realized I wasn't chasing money. I was chasing identity. It's been over a year now. I haven't blown up another account. I haven't gotten rich either. But I understand risk in a way I didn't before. I don't chase anymore. I don't revenge trade. And I don't think I'm smarter than the market. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that first trade on Monday had gone poorly. Maybe I would have gotten scared off. Maybe I would have respected the danger earlier. But that win gave me confidence I hadn't earned yet. It tricked me into thinking I had skill, when really I'd just gotten lucky. Now I keep a sticky note on my monitor. It says, "You are not your P&L." That reminder keeps me grounded. Because the truth is, I still trade. Carefully, methodically. But I also go days without opening my brokerage app, and I sleep fine at night. That week in 2023 still haunts me sometimes, but it also taught me what no course or coach ever could. So, yeah, that's how I made $1,800 on Monday and lost $6,000 by Friday. One green candle to start the week, and one very expensive education to end it. Story 7. I wired $3,000 for an apartment that didn't exist. I had 72 hours to move. My lease was ending, my landlord had already rented my unit to someone else, and I was staring down the possibility of being homeless in a city I barely knew. I had just moved for a new job. Mid-sized city, decent salary, but housing was tight. I had been living in a short-term sublet while trying to find a permanent apartment. I'd toured a dozen places, applied to 5, been ghosted by 3, and rejected by 2. My start date was approaching. I was tired, stressed, and getting desperate. That's when I found the listing. A spacious 1-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors, big windows, and a washer-dryer in unit. $1,500 a month, utilities included. It looked too good to be true, because it was. The listing was on Craigslist. I emailed. The landlord, a woman named Meredith, responded quickly. Said she had lived in the unit but had to relocate overseas for work. She seemed nice, professional. Said she wanted someone clean and respectful. She couldn't show the place in person, but she offered to do a virtual tour. She sent me a video walkthrough of a fully furnished apartment. I asked a few questions. What floor is it on? Is there street parking? How do I pay rent? And she had answers for all of them. She even sent me a lease to sign. To hold the unit, she said, I needed to send the first month's rent and a $1,500 security deposit. Wire transfer only. I hesitated. Something about the urgency felt off. But I also knew I had less than 3 days to find housing. Hotels were booking up for a citywide convention. My new job was non-negotiable on start dates. I wired $3,000 that afternoon. The next day, I tried to confirm move-in instructions. No response. I emailed again, then I called the number she'd given me. It went straight to voicemail. By the second day, I was panicking. I Googled the address. It was a real building. I called the leasing office. They told me there was no unit by that number, and nobody named Meredith had ever owned property there. I called my bank. They said the transfer had already cleared. There was nothing they could do. I filed a police report. The officer was sympathetic, but said this kind of thing happened all the time. Wire fraud is hard to track, he told me. They move fast. I spent the next 2 nights in a budget motel by the highway. The shower barely worked. The sheets smelled like bleach. I cried both nights, not just because I was out $3,000, but because I felt like the biggest idiot in the world. Eventually, I found a short-term furnished rental. It cost more than I wanted to spend, but I had no other options. I moved in and started my job on time. I told my coworkers I was still getting settled when they asked how the move had gone. I didn't tell anyone what really happened for a long time. I couldn't even say it out loud without feeling the sting of shame. I had been so careful with money my whole life. I used coupons, I packed lunch, I checked my credit score religiously. And in one moment of desperation, I let my guard down. I wanted something to be easy. I wanted someone to just say yes. Eventually, I did tell someone, a friend from college. She admitted she almost fell for a similar scam when she was looking for housing in New York. Said the listing used photos from a hotel and the fake landlord asked for Venmo instead of a proper application. That conversation helped. It reminded me that scams don't work because people are stupid. They work because people are vulnerable, in transition, under pressure, tired and hopeful and human. Since then, I've made some new rules. I never wire money. I never rent anything I haven't seen in person or verified through a reputable platform. I trust my gut when something feels off, and I try not to judge myself too harshly for that one mistake. It still stings though. That money was supposed to be my safety net. I had saved it over years of careful spending, skipping vacations, driving an old car, and saying no to impulse buys. It wasn't just money, it was effort, patience, discipline. After I moved into the short-term rental, I spent weeks checking every apartment listing like it was a potential scam. I called landlords twice, asked for video walkthroughs and proof of identity. I started keeping a spreadsheet of addresses, contacts, and notes. It was obsessive, but I couldn't help it. I had been burned, and I didn't want it to happen again. Eventually, I found a place. A little more expensive, but through a reputable property management company. I signed the lease in person. I picked up keys from an actual office. When I finally moved in, I stood in the empty living room and cried again. Not from fear this time, but relief. I've since rebuilt that emergency fund. It took time, a lot of weekends in, a lot of saying no to things. But I got there. And I've learned that sometimes the cost of a lesson isn't just what you lose, but what it takes to feel safe again. So yeah, that's how I lost $3,000 to an apartment that didn't exist. A moment of panic, a fake lease, and a very expensive lesson in trust. And maybe a reminder that sometimes, when everything feels urgent, the smartest move is to slow down.